was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie. Please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom! Boom! I hear it and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. Hello, I'm Penny St., and I'm the host of Peace with Penny. Recently, we spoke with Steve Kalishman of Citizen Diplomacy Initiatives, which promotes people-to-people contacts through sister city relationships in Russia and in the Middle East. Because of the war between Russia and Ukraine happening as we speak, and Steve's extensive background with Russia and Poland, I asked him what his friends from Russia and Poland were telling him, and he told us what he could. He conceded that obviously he doesn't know all Russians, but this is what he's heard. This also isn't a show about history, although we're seeing it created before our eyes. I think it's important to listen, regardless of if you agree. The first 15 minutes of our conversation is on what he's hearing from people who live in Russia and Poland. Afterwards, we get into the main topic, which is Citizen Diplomacy Initiative's terrific work in the Middle East. What he's recounted is very different from what we hear on our news. It sounds familiar because of what we're told that Putin says as well. Probably I shouldn't have been so shocked. It's what is broadcasted on their news. To be fair, what we hear on our news depends on what channel you listen to as well. To many of us, it sounds absurd. Nazis in Ukraine's government, that president is Jewish? Yet, I'm no Ukrainian Russian historian. Are you? But then again, dead bodies with hands tied and women and children fleeing seems unambiguous. The situation is complicated, and the only clear conclusion I came to is admitting to myself how our own perceptions create our own reality. Trying not to judge is a lesson in peace. Maybe we find the grace to look within and acknowledge that what we see is a story we've created from our own thoughts, and we tell ourselves they are facts, but are they? May we have the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Steve Kalishman is a Jewish American and a lawyer working actively in Gainesville, Florida. He is the founding director of Citizen Diplomacy Initiatives, president of the Sister City Program of Gainesville, Inc., and he sits on the advisory board at EcoPeace Middle East. Gainesville is no stranger to sister city relationships, as during the height of the Cold War with Russia in the 80s, he was able to help establish 300 sister city relationships between American cities and Russian cities. Today, Gainesville, Florida also has contacts with Poland, and will be able to take an abbreviated sideline to tap into some of what he's heard from his Russian and Polish friends to learn what they understand about what's happening in the Russian-Ukraine war. Today, Citizen Diplomacy Initiatives concentrates on encouraging American, Israeli, and Palestinian people to acquire a consciousness and understanding of one another as individuals, as members of their communities, as citizens of their countries, and as part of the family of nations through the formation of three-way sister city relationships. In 1997, Citizen Diplomacy Initiatives used the establishment of a water treatment plant in Qalqilia in the Palestinian territories to begin a three-way sister city agreement between the Israeli city of Kfar Saba, Qalqilia, and Gainesville, Florida. The need for the facility drove the incentive to work together peacefully. Amen. We'll be able to hear many stories of creative programs that have developed since, including music with the Los Angeles-based hip-hop group Luminaries, sharing children's art projects aligned between the cities, and a documentary called When People Lead. We'll be discussing how establishing these sister city relationships have helped bridge the gap toward mutual cooperation, yielding benefits far beyond city borders. It's our intention for Peace with Penny to be a source of hope as people see that Israelis and Palestinians do want peace, and bless all the intelligent, creative, and devoted peace activists who work hard to improve the lives of their communities. We show you that Israelis and Palestinians, we believe the majority, do want peace with one another. Unfortunately, it's the extremists that make the news. If you'd like to learn more about Peace with Penny, please reach out to us at penny@pennystee.com. With the increased violence this week in Israel, and as the holy holidays of Ramadan, Easter, and Passover are upon us, we hope that the situation will calm down. And as the pictures of the horrors appear on our TV screens at home of the barbarous violence in Ukraine, I'm interested in what Steve's heard from his friends on the ground in Russia and Poland. So let's get started. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Penny.
I know that Gainesville has several sister cities in various parts of the world, and that one is in Russia and one is in Poland. I didn't want to embarrass myself trying to pronounce their names, but could you tell us their names and how long you've had the sister city relationships with each?
Sure. The one in Russia is called Novorossiysk on the Black Sea. And the one in Poland, that was established in 1982. And the one in Poland is called Rzeszów, and that was established in 2006.
And I know that you were instrumental in establishing 300 sister city relationships in Russia and the US from 1982 to 1991. So you know lots of Russian people. In fact, you recently attended 2 sister city conferences, and your wife also happens to be from Russia and has many relatives and friends there that she speaks with. What's been going on in Russia impacted your Russian sister city relationships?
No, it hasn't affected our program. Our mayor is very understanding of the value of sister cities, and we're not concerned with national or international affairs. We basically focus on city to city relations, municipal issues, and people to people contacts.
Now, I know you wanted to be clear that all these opinions are your own and have nothing to do with your official sister city statements. What's their impression of what's going on in the Russian-Ukrainian war?
I mean, this war to them has been going on for 8 years now. It started in 2014 when there was a violent coup that overthrew the democratically elected president of Ukraine, followed by an election a few weeks later, which the Russians in the Crimea and Donbass regions didn't have an opportunity to vote. So they haven't recognized the government of Ukraine since this coup occurred. And there are elements of the Ukrainian society, which identifies Nazis. And it's not just some fringe group. After the coup, there were 5 government ministers with swastikas on their arms. So, the Soviet Union and Russia suffered terribly in World War II at the hands of the Nazis. They bore the brunt of the Nazi invasion, and it made them extremely concerned to see, Nazi groups in the government and battalions, part of the military, the National Guard, and all, and being armed and talking about becoming members of NATO. So I think overall, they support what the government's doing. They don't want a repeat of what happened in 1941. And so it's a complicated situation. Obviously, war is a terrible thing. They know that more than anyone else. 30 million people were killed in World War II by the Nazis. So, but I think they're supportive of their government. And, it's sort of like here, you can't say anything against the groupthink about Ukraine without being accused of being a Russian sympathizer or a stooge of Putin or whatever people want to say. So it's the same thing over there. I'm sure there are social pressures to support the government like we do here. So it's a big country. I don't know what everybody's thinking. I'm sure there are people that are opposed to war. They're opposed to this war. There's a lot of Russians living in Ukraine. There's a lot of Ukrainians living in Russia. It's not like our wars where we go on the other side of the world and bomb countries and, we don't really have any connections there. But in this case, it's families. And so it makes it very difficult. It's almost like a civil war. So, so they're very upset about it. I'm sure they don't want to see their soldiers dying. They don't want to see innocent people dying, but this happens when wars occur. And to me, a war is just a failure of diplomacy. So, that's pretty much, the way I think the people that I've talked to are thinking.
Wow, well, you really blew my mind with that commentary. Definitely not something the way it's approached here. I have to ask, because you seem to be actually giving credence to what Putin was saying, at least in.
Yeah, I'm a Putin sympathizer.
No.
You asked me what the people over there are thinking.
Yeah, yes.
That's what I'm telling you. That's what they're thinking.
Yeah. And I'm trying to find out from you. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm trying to find out what, because he's mentioned Nazis and all that, and we don't really, because of Zelensky being Jewish, we don't hear any of that. Are you saying the government that Zelensky's in charge of now has Nazi influences and but yet he's still in charge of it?
Yeah. If he, as long as he takes the right actions, then they'll let him do whatever. But as soon as he, like, for instance, if he decides to sign some kind of peace agreement to end this war with Russia, you can bet there's going to be pushback, and it could be more than just talk. And this is based on, basically what's been happening for the last 8 years. In 2014, the Ukraine and Russia signed an agreement called the Minsk Agreement and then Minsk II Agreement. And those agreements stated that the Donbas region, which is on the border, it's in Ukraine on the border with Russia, that it would become sort of independent, still within Ukraine, but an autonomous region that could be self-governing locally. Well, the Nazis didn't like that idea. And so for the last 8 years, they've been bombing the Donbas region. They've been firing missiles into cities there. And sometimes, these missiles miss their mark and go into Russia. And so I guess you always hear Israel say that every country has the right to defend itself from rockets being fired into its territory. And so I guess Russia probably feels the same way. 15,000 people have been killed in Donbass over the last 8 years by these fascist groups. So coupling that with the possibility of NATO, adding Ukraine, I think the Russians have been saying for quite some time that's not going to be acceptable. So, and by the way, I don't think this is about Putin at all. I mean, if he left office today and another guy came in, it would be the same result. Putin's got a 80% approval rating. I think Biden's around 29%. So, I think this is what the Russians want. And
well, I did kind of want to talk about the people. I didn't want to get into politics at all, but interesting.
This is what they're thinking. This is what's going on in their mind. This is what they see and how they see the world, And by the way, I was in Washington, D.C. a few years ago, and the last U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union, named Jack Matlack, he was the ambassador under Reagan to the Soviet Union. And he made a speech there and said, Americans have this misconception about how the Cold War ended. It was a negotiated settlement with Russia, with the Soviet Union. And part of that negotiation was a guarantee that if the Soviet Union allowed Germany to reunify, which they had, they had rights there because of what happened in World War II, they had to agree to it. And the quid pro quo to that agreement was that NATO would never move an inch east of Berlin. And since that time, every country between Berlin and Russia has become a member of NATO, 13 countries, the only exception being one, which is Ukraine.
I'm not certain what to do with this segment, just because I had intended it to be more of a people discussion, not a political discussion.
Well, you asked me what the people are thinking. This is what it is. So,
well, no, it just seemed timely, but
yeah, it's timely, and I think it needs to be heard because everybody's just assuming.
In Poland, in your I know that they've, in your Poland sister city, that they've had some refugees coming there. Have they described what that situation's like?
Well, these are, people that they're trying to help. They're putting them up in whatever shelter they can give them and trying to help them, feed them or whatever. Okay. The director of that program lives in Gainesville, our Gainesville Rzeszów Sister City program. She's from Rzeszów. They have a home there that they've made available to Ukrainian refugees. We were supposed to go there next month. She's saying that we shouldn't plan on doing that because the war is only 50 kilometers away. And, there's every day, these huge cargo planes are taking off from Poland into Ukraine with military equipment. So, I think we'd be a distraction if we went there, although the mayor still wants us to come because they're having a annual street festival. And this year, the theme is American food. So they were just here, the mayor was just here last month and he asked us to come, but I think we're going to have to postpone it.
Okay, well, let's move on.
Sure.
Thanks, Steve, for adding some insight into what's happening in another area of the world that desperately needs to have peace. Let's get started talking about the main subject, which is how there are Israelis and Palestinians and sometimes others working on peace together. In your organization's citizen diplomacy initiatives, you've been working hard on improving relationships between Israelis and Palestinians and others working toward peace. One of the projects you've been working on for 11 years is to put together a documentary of your work called When People Lead. We've got a trailer of it that I'd like to show because it does a great job demonstrating what citizen diplomacy initiatives is all about. So let's take a look at that.
Political leaders will never take risks if the people do not push them to take some risks.
To have the opportunity to interact with people from the Middle East, from Israel and Palestine on a human level is exactly what I think the world needs.
Well, let's talk. Let's have a conversation now, huh?
When we start with people-to-people relations, it will help.
You know, human relations and relationships are so important.
In 1998, Gainesville, Florida started a three-way sister city program with the cities of Qalqilia and Kfar Saba and Gainesville.
This program, we feel, is different.
You know, our goal is to pair every Israeli and Palestinian city with a U.S. city in a three-way relationship.
This is a great initiative.
I think the idea is great, really.
A good platform for good relationship.
Absolutely. We want this kind of, of relation to go ahead.
We need bridges of love and understanding.
I think that we can be a bridge.
We would like to have cooperation.
It will provide us with an ample opportunity to really begin to move in the direction of sustainable crime.
Let's do the 50-50-50.
We'll work on that, inshallah.
What we're here to do is make personal relationships first.
And I'm really excited about having the luminaries here.
Be the change that you want to see in the world, like Gandhi live for peace. Aspire to be someone who fights for the beliefs, like Martin Luther King. Aspire to be.
In 1982, the city of Gainesville initiated the first U.S.-Soviet sister city program. At that time, it was the height of the Cold War. There was no conversations or relationships between ordinary American and Soviet people. And it was a very dangerous time, 50,000 nuclear weapons, threats of using them, and people were scared. So we started this sister city program. We took delegations there. Other cities began contacting us. After a few years, we were able to connect 200 U.S. and Soviet cities. And then President Reagan went on television and said, this is what we need, more sister city programs.
Enduring peace requires openness, honest communications, and opportunities for our peoples to get to know one another directly. We're proposing the broadest people-to-people exchanges in the history of American-Soviet relations. People-to-people contacts can build genuine constituencies for peace in both countries. After all, people don't start wars. Governments do.
So we're at a critical point here in our project.
If they won't even listen, how can there be any hope?
The wall that we came across there was much higher and much thicker than any physical wall that I've seen here.
It's so close, but mentally it's very far for us.
Keep asking questions, searching for answers, trying to find ways we can just
Writing
heal.
poems, flowers of forgiveness.
We are under occupation.
A lot of people died.
We can't change all this warring. People are starving. How many children have to be killed? Maybe the world is just a reflection of how I feel.
How do we stop the suffering of regular people?
The world is just a reflection of how I feel.
I don't want to get emotional.
Maybe the world is just a reflection of how I feel.
All the people
Maybe
want
the world is just a reflection of how I feel.
I believe we can do it together.
I said people to people. Change is going to occur here, and it's going to start with the young people.
They are capable of creating peace and change in the world.
You know, this trip has opened up my eyes.
This time I have tears of joy.
Waiting is not an option anymore.
We need to get these people together.
And not accept the status quo.
We're going to give it everything we've got.
aspire to be.
When the leaders get stuck and they're no longer able to effectively lead, that's when the people lead.
I know these types of projects can take a very long time. When do you think the documentary will be ready?
Well, we're speaking with the editor in Los Angeles now, who has been dragging his feet. So we're hoping to maybe get someone else to finish it up, at least do a rough cut that we can send around and use it to raise money to do the final film with.
Okay, so speaking of citizen diplomacy initiatives, how would you describe your organization?
Well, it's we promote sister city programs in Russia, between the U.S. and Russia, and between the U.S. and Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian cities, as a way of connecting people to their counterparts or organizations, institutions, or individuals. It's a permanent relationship so that over time you develop trust and people are willing to listen to what you have to say because you're invested in the project. It's not just, oh, I got this great idea, something, then they never hear from you again. So by creating these long-term trusting relationships, we're able to develop a constituency for peace that President Obama spoke about when he was over there a few years ago, that the political leaders are going to do what the people want them to do. So we hope to accomplish this by developing all kinds of a web of relationships between groups and people in all these cities that'll give the official diplomats a safety net so they can go out on a limb and take chances and make decisions that are going to be beneficial to everyone in the long run. But they have to feel like there's some support from the people. And so that's what we're working from the bottom up.
What's the mission for citizen diplomacy initiatives?
Well, our mission in the Middle East is to connect every Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian city with a US city in a multilateral relationship. For example, Gainesville has a sister city in Israel, Palestine, and Jordan. And although we can't all come together right now for projects, we can develop our relations on different tracks like Gainesville, Qalqilia, Gainesville, Kfar Gainesville, Deir Allah. And then at the right time, we can bring everyone together to do projects and to cultural exchange, educational exchange, sports, business, tourism, I mean, you name it. There's an infinite number of possibilities. We're only limited by our imagination.
Yeah.
In Russia,
Go ahead.
sorry. Well, I was going to say that's the Middle East. In Russia, I mean, we actually started citizen diplomacy initiatives during the Cold War in the early 80s. And by 1991, we had helped connect 300 US and Soviet cities. The Soviet Union was dissolved. We were supposedly allies or friends at that point, talking about all the things we could do. Of course, the space program and the nuclear issues and everything. It was good times. So I think we did back then what should be the goal of every nonprofit organization, to make yourself unnecessary. So I think at that point, we felt like we had done all we could do. All these cities were having exchanges without any help from citizen diplomacy initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of turned our attention to the Middle East a few years later. But now, I mean, we're going back to the Cold War Cold War II, I'll call it Cold War II. So it's dangerous. I mean, you know, when you have two states like the US and Russia that have so many nuclear weapons, you know, one incident can set off a chain reaction that could result in the end of the world. I mean, it's not just, oh, we're gonna have a war and then afterwards we'll be fine. No, if there's a nuclear war, everyone dies. And we're so close to doing it. We're playing with fire. So it's at times like this that sister city programs are the most valuable and important ways of keeping channels of communication open. If you, like some cities have done, say, well, we're not going to have any Russian sister cities. So these people in their city have worked for 20, 30 years developing these relationships. And then some mayor comes in and says, well, we don't like what the Russian government's doing, so we're going to punish the people in our sister city. You know, that doesn't make any sense to me. And in fact, I would bet that if you ask the State Department, they would say, no, we need to keep the sister cities. In fact, Sister Cities International, which is basically funded by the State Department, put out a letter stating that, you know, everyone wants to, you know, take a stand against war, but terminating sister city programs is not the way to do it, because it's the worst thing you can do. So
it sounds like, and you were able to, during the Cold War, establish all these relationships. But let's get back to your projects in the Middle East. I believe your first sister cities were with Gainesville, Florida, and the city in Russia and Poland that you talked about.
That is not a three-way relationship. It's just, we have 9 sister cities in the city of Gainesville. And Novorossiysk is the first one that we were involved with. There were some before that, but they're no longer in existence. And then later, you know, 15 years later, 20 years later, the Polish program started. And most of these programs result from people who lived in the foreign cities, moved to Gainesville, and still have contacts back there, and are community leaders here, and they started an organization to develop a friendship with those cities.
Great. And then another relationship, the main ones we want to talk about are the ones with Gainesville, Kfar Saba, and Qalqilia in the Palestinian territories, and Kfar Saba's in Israel. And
that was designed to be a three-way program from the beginning. And then later we made it 4-way when we added the Jordanian city to the mix.
Right. And so this is, who are these people here?
So that was a delegation from Kfar Saba and Qalqilia. So half of them are Palestinians and half are Israelis. They came together on the same airplane in 2000, the year 2000. This was a Rotary Club luncheon that hosted us. Actually, when they were here, it was July of 2000. And while this group was in Gainesville, talking about our three-way relationship that we were going to have, Arafat and Barak, Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat were in Washington, D.C. meeting with President Clinton to try to work out a peace agreement. And we were hoping and praying that that would happen, but of course it didn't. And then 2 months later, the second intifada started. And then, you know, that things went downhill from there.
And this is the symbol, I believe, the logo of their...
Yes, that's the three-way, you know, it's the Israeli flag, the Palestinian flag, the American flag. You know, 3 cities, 1 world was our motto.
Great.
And we hope to be, we wanted to be a model for other US, Israeli, and Palestinian cities to duplicate. And there are a few, but because of the, you know, situation over there, it's not really active because Israelis and Palestinians don't want to have anything to do with each other. So, you know, but the American cities can still develop the relationships with both and still one day hope to bring everyone together.
What happened here with the deaf school in Calkilia? How did that?
One year when we were visiting there with the delegation, they took us to their deaf school, and they have the only deaf school in Palestine. But we learned that the kids could only get up to a 9th grade education at this school. They didn't have the building or the resources to give them a high school education, which meant they were not only were they deaf, not only were they under occupation, but they also couldn't get an education. So we came back to Gainesville, and a local school decided to do some fundraising to help them expand their school so they could have high school there. And it was a great project. We actually ended up raising way more than, we were trying to raise $350,000 to expand their school.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up raising 1.5 million, and they built a brand new school instead.
Wow.
And it's beautiful. It's there. I saw it a couple of years ago when I was there. Right when it was finished, they converted it to a COVID clinic. But I think they're, now, using it as a deaf school, and it's the only one for the whole, West Bank and Gaza. And so, but then after that, we got a State Department grant to do a virtual exchange with our local students in high school, college, and the University of Florida, corresponding with the kids at the deaf school to create the first Palestinian video sign language dictionary. And that was a great project. We got to visit there. They came here. We made a film about it. I think I sent you a link to it. And then, we've remained friends ever since. That was a great example of what you can do with the Sister City program.
That sounds terrific.
Yeah, we changed the lives of thousands of Palestinians, and probably other, there are not that many deaf schools in the Arab world, in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually sort of an embarrassment if you have a deaf child. So they like try to keep them at home so nobody knows they're deaf, or they just send them away to live with somebody else. I mean, it's really hard for the kids. So we're hoping that representatives of other countries in the Middle East will come to Calkilia and see what they're doing for their deaf kids there, and go back home and do the same thing in their countries, which I think will also help the economy in Calkilia. So they're going to build a hotel. They've got the only zoo in the West Bank. So they do have, some things for people to do there. So we think that this is not only going to change the deaf kids' lives, but it'll change a lot of other people's lives as well. So it's really great to do a project like that. I mean, it makes you feel like, it's not just people getting together and having a good time.
Yeah.
Also some real benefits on the ground to the local people.
Yeah. Well, if we could speak about another amazing project that you had with actually a LA hip hop group that came there called Luminaries. Can you talk about that project?
Sure. So we were planning a trip there in 2011 with our mayor and a city council member and some school teachers. And I was looking around on the internet trying to find some music we were going to make a film about this. So we were going to take a film crew with us. We ended up just hiring an Israeli film crew over there instead. But we needed some music. So I looked online, I found this incredible video by this group, the Luminaries, called Be the Change. If you go on YouTube and search Luminaries Be the Change, you'll see it. It's an amazing music video. So I contacted them and asked them for permission to use that video in our film. And they said, well, yeah, you can use the video, but we might be interested in being a part of this. Tell us more about it. So they came to Gainesville. They did some concerts here to raise money, and they ended up going with us. So there were 5 of them and 9 other people in the group. And so when we went there, it was the greatest thing because they were able to relate to the younger generation. And by the way, in the Middle East, the population is very young.
Yes, yes.
You know, all these people that were driving the Arab Spring, all these revolutions and things, were all kids in their 20s. So with the luminaries, we were able to connect with these kids. And because they don't want to hear from a bunch of old white guys. I mean, you know, this group was, and they have hip hop in Israel and Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
They have skating, they have all these things, you know, parkours. So it was great because everywhere we went, the luminaries performed, and we got to demonstrate, you know, what the value of a Sister City program can be, because we can do these kinds of projects. We went to Oktoberfest in the West Bank, and you know, think, well, that's the last thing I thought we'd ever find in the West Bank is a beer festival, because you know, Muslims don't drink beer. But it turns out that about 20% of Palestinians are Christians, or they were back then. So this was a Christian village that was having this festival, and we became friends with the mayor and his wife, and then we've been back there many times. They have a beautiful hotel. Taipei is the name of the city. It's like a suburb of Ramallah. And so that's part of our program, you know, to bring cultural exchange to the region, to bring American music and culture and dance, and to share, you know, our best, and to invite them to come to us and do the same. So it was a fantastic project, and we're still, you know, actually one of the film editor that I was mentioning before is one of the luminaries.
Oh, really?
You know, he's in Los Angeles. Yeah.
Ah.
He's a busy man.
Yeah. So also you did
on the right there. That's in City Hall. Yeah, that's in the City Hall, because they didn't have an auditorium in Qalqilya, so they let us use their City Hall for this concert. I mean, talk about trust. Okay, we bring this group, they've never heard them before. We say they're going to perform, they put them in their City Hall, they invite people, and these kids showed up, and it was an incredible experience. I'll just say it was an amazing thing, because the parents of these kids didn't really like their kids doing hip hop. You know, they didn't think it was, they thought it was some decadent Western thing. But then when they saw the luminaries, which is basically a professional group, come in, and then, you know, they were able to connect with the kids, and then the parents kind of realized, well, maybe this isn't so bad, you know, because the luminaries aren't rapping about violence and hate and you know, extreme things. They're talking about peace, love, and understanding.
Right.
So we connected. These kids connected with the luminaries. They came on stage. We had, actually, there's another film crew there from New York. We didn't even know they were in Qalqilya, but they heard about this concert and they showed up, and so it was just one of those moments, like you go, wow, this is incredible. This is what Sister Cities is all about.
Very cool. And you also had these art projects.
So on the left is the high school teachers from Gainesville. Robert Ponzio did that mural behind him. And Jason Stahl was the music director at that high school. So Pons did that three cities mural for the logo for us. And that's one of his paintings. He did what you call performance art, which means he would start painting in front of the stage when the music started. And by the time the concert was over, the painting was done.
Wow.
And he was painting whatever he was seeing.
Wow.
So,
how cool is that?
And then that painting there on the left, you can see, is on the wall. There's a wall, you know, Israel has this wall, but Qalqilia has the distinction of having the wall completely surrounded.
Mm,
So we went to that wall and we painted that mural there with some of the kids in Qalqilia. But you can
very,
see it's
very
about
cool.
peace. See, there's a peace sign, and there's
Yes.
Qalqilia's art, and there's hearts and doves, and it's not like anything else that's on that wall, believe me.
Yeah. You also had citizen diplomacy and tours that were offered that provided jobs. Could you talk about that project?
Well, it's called Citizen Diplomacy Tours.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what we do in the Sister City program is we take groups to our sister cities. That's to me, is the most valuable activity that we participate in. And our goal is to bring thousands, tens of thousands of Americans to Israel and Palestine and Jordan, so they can see for themselves what's going on. They can meet people and learn about what's happening there without any preconceived notions, agendas, or without our telling them what to think or believe about it. They just go there and they talk to people, just like you did. You go there, you talk to people, you learn from their perspective what's going on. So we do these citizen diplomacy tours because it's not just official delegations. Any group that comes to us and says, we'd like to go to the Holy Land, but we don't want to just go as tourists. We want to meet people. We want to live with people. We want to go to their homes and their schools and their jobs. And we want to really learn what's going on. And I can tell you, after 40 years of taking delegations to the Soviet Union and the Middle East, every time people come back and say it was a life-changing experience.
It's also life-changing for the people who are taking the people on tours as well. It's providing jobs. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've partnered with a group over there called Eco Peace Middle East, and they have all kinds of programs, local programs for visitors. And so when we bring groups, we hire them to, create events, introduce us to people, and yeah, I mean, it helps their economy as well.
Well, speaking of Eco Peace, there was this incredible project about climate change and a joint effort between Israelis, Palestinians, and Jordanians for water projects. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So the year after we got back from that trip with the luminaries, we were invited to speak at the Sister Cities International annual conference, and that's where we met the people from EcoPeace who were there as well. And from that time on, we started working with them because they're an amazing organization. They're the only organization that I know of that's actually got Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian cities doing anything together. And mainly it's about environmental projects, because they've all decided that despite the political issues and problems over there, the environment won't wait for a peace agreement. So they're going to all cooperate on a limited basis around the environment. And that's what they're doing.
I will say, just if I could interject, thankfully, that's what Peace with Penny is all about. And there are many organizations that are working with Israelis and Palestinians together, but you just don't hear about it on the news, which is
I'm sure
part of the point.
But they're not, they don't have the mayors, the ministers, and the members of Knesset and Parliament. They don't have them doing anything together.
Well, actually they do, but not so much the government, but there's many peace organizations that do have the that are based on interfaith, and it's really great. But let's you know what, let me show, we do have a little clip about this project that we can play.
We together face a common threat due to conflict and climate-induced water scarcity. The past 20 years have witnessed recurring drought, the deepest droughts in our recorded history. They have contributed to wider cross-border implications on increased water scarcity, political instability, as well as increased refugees and humanitarian crises in our region.
20th century assumptions that dictated water diplomacy led us down a path of conflict and competition. When a river is a border and is demised, there is poverty. So on the Jordanian side of the Jordan Valley, for instance, there's 40% unemployment. Poverty very much goes to the heart of the situation on the ground.
We need to involve the communities, the residents, the people that are most affected by the shortage of water that we are facing. We're a unique regional organization, the only regional organization that brings together Jordanians, Israelis, and Palestinian environmentalists to protect the very few shared water resources that we have in our region. We seek to advance both sustainable development, but to also build the necessary conditions for lasting peace.
Climate change means that cooperation is more needed than ever. Together we can meet the challenges we face and build a more peaceful, resilient global community.
I love all these projects that you have. They're just come from so many different vantage points and are helpful in so many different ways. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about that particular issue, given particularly that area is so deprived of water?
Yeah, I mean, they've got to cooperate. There's no choice. And EcoPeace has managed to develop enough credibility and trust to get them to work together, municipalities around environmental issues. And we've brought Israeli, Palestinian, Jordanian mayors to the U.S. with EcoPeace. I think you saw in that When the People Lead featurette. We were at the Woodrow Wilson Center signing an agreement with Sister Cities International. We also have an agreement with the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. We took U.S. and Canadian mayors over there. We've done a lot of projects with EcoPeace, and they're working with Parsaba and Kalkilia around, it's all about water and energy. Mm-hmm. They've got a great project that actually Israel and Jordan just signed an agreement to exchange water for energy. So Jordan produces a lot of green energy, and Israel doesn't have the places to do it. Jordan has these vast open spaces that are filled with solar collectors. So they're able to sell green energy to Israel, which helps Israel meet its climate change goals of a certain percentage of green energy. And Israel is able to sell water to Jordan because they desalinate all of their drinking water now. And so they're able to sell water to Jordan, which is the third poorest water country in the world. So it's a great example of the benefits to both sides of cooperating around environmental issues without giving up anything on the political front. But they don't talk about politics. So it's a very successful program over there. They've got like 100 groups that meet regularly and around all different kinds of topics and subjects. We also got to attend a Model UN event that they did in Jerusalem a few years ago with our mayor. So they had Israeli and Palestinian high school kids doing a Model UN, which is basically you assign kids a country to represent. They have to research the interests of that country and present those interests at the thing in English. So, and then Dr. Stolov and his chairman of his board, came to Gainesville, and we established an Interfaith Encounter Association group here. And there's others in the U.S. now as well. I think in New Jersey and Washington and somewhere else. So yeah, they're expanding all over the world, and we're a part of that organization. And for us, it's just content for a sister city relationship. It's a program that we can offer to our sister city program supporters.
Can you tell us about the Interfaith Encounter Association and your association with them?
So on one of our trips, I got to meet the founder of the Interfaith Encounter Association in Jerusalem, Dr. Yehuda Stalov, and we became friends. We talked about the possibility of expanding that organization to the U.S. So what they do in Israel and Palestine is they bring people together from different faiths. So it's, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish people who meet to talk about anything and everything except politics. So they talk about their religion, their culture, and their philosophy, their theology.
How has COVID impacted your programs?
Well, we've had to do everything by Zoom.
Yeah, so
And
you've been
actually,
able to continue that way?
Yeah. Before COVID, they never met by Zoom. And Yehuda was complaining to me about, the fact that COVID is restricting them. I said, well, with every challenge, there's an opportunity. So, if you do these by Zoom right now, you can include people from all over the world.
Right.
Just whoever can come to that one spot. So they started doing that, and it worked out, really well for them. And we've done a few things, over the years, but over here is probably more, instead of interfaith, we should be talking about, getting Republicans and Democrats to sit down and talk.
That's a whole other topic. Has the recent violence impacted your programs at all?
I mean, COVID's impacted it because we couldn't go there for 2 years. I was there in the beginning of 2019, right before COVID started, and but haven't been back since because we can't. So we do some things by Zoom with students and
not COVID, but has the violence, the recent violence impacted?
No, because again, it has nothing to do with our sister cities.
Okay.
I mean, maybe it would prevent people from, wanting to go there right now, but we don't have any groups going there now anyway. So no, it really hadn't.
Okay. I always like to ask some personal questions because people kind of like to find out what created this peace activist. So where were you born?
In Washington, D.C.
And did you grow up there?
No, I grew up in Pensacola, Florida. My dad was in the service and stationed in Washington. So I was born at Walter Reed, but then got to Pensacola as quick as I could and grew up there through high school and then moved to Gainesville, Florida to go to college. And basically have been here ever since.
Yeah, and you had a real interesting story about how you met your wife in Russia. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I wanted to travel, but I didn't have any money. So I joined the Merchant Marine, which is a union job, people who work on commercial ships. So back then, 1976, the US was selling grain to the Soviet Union as part of the Détente agreements between Brezhnev and Nixon. And so there was I got a job on a ship that was going from Houston to Novorossiysk, or to several Black Sea ports, Odessa, Novorossiysk, and others. And that's where I met my wife. I went back as a tourist. We got married in Novorossiysk. We had our honeymoon in Sochi. where they had the Winter Olympics a couple years ago. And then she moved to the US. And then in 1982, we were going to go back there to visit her family and thought, oh, wouldn't it be great to have some kind of a cultural exchange between Gainesville and Novorossiysk, since we, had connections to both cities. So that's when I learned about sister cities. Someone suggested, why don't you do a sister city program? We looked into it, and there were no US Soviet sister city programs that were active at the time. So we said, sure, let's try it. So we got our city to pass a resolution inviting the city of Novorossiysk to become sister cities with Gainesville. And my wife and I personally hand delivered that resolution to Novorossiysk, and that's how the program got started.
That's really cool. So I know that you're Jewish, but were your parents interested in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Or how did you get interested in it? When did you get interested in it?
I got interested in it when the mayor of Qalqilia and the deputy mayor of Karsaba came to Gainesville in 1997 to get help from the University of Florida in receiving a USAID grant to build a water treatment plant between their two cities. And our mayor at the time, who had just come back from a visit to our Russian sister city, says to these two mayors, well, why don't we have a three-way sister city program? And the Palestinian mayor said, oh, I don't know. I don't think that could work. And the Israeli mayor was like, no, that's not going to happen. But they both said, if Gainesville invites us, we think we can do it. So we invited them. And then the next year, our mayor at the time led a delegation to both cities. We signed official agreements, and we became a three-way sister city program. And then 2 years later, they came to Gainesville.
That's awesome. What languages do you speak?
I speak some Russian and English. I mean, I've dabbled in other languages, but I wouldn't say I speak them.
Yeah.
I did learn some Hebrew and some German, but mainly it's just Russian.
I would imagine your wife speaks English?
Better than I do. She's got 2 master's degrees in English and a law degree from the University of Florida.
Oh,
so
she's also a lawyer. Oh my goodness. You must have some interesting discussion.
Yeah. I mean, my son used to complain. He said, I can't win an argument at home because both of my parents are lawyers.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. It's quite a debate going on.
So yeah, she had just graduated with a master's in English when I met her.
Very good. Very good.
But we spoke only Russian at home until my son was 6 years old and started school. So I'll say that I speak Russian like a 6-year-old.
So what do you think the greatest accomplishments of your organizations have been?
Well, I mean, connecting 300 US and Soviet cities was pretty great. And then, we haven't, well, if we ever finish this film, I think that's going to be great.
It's certainly, the trailer certainly looks interesting.
Yeah. I mean, my ultimate goal is, to help create a Palestinian state living in peace side by side with Israel. And actually, if they ever get over this conflict, it could be a hugely prosperous area because, I found that the Palestinians are really more like Westerners than they are like other Arab peoples. They like democracy, they like entrepreneurism, they have secular societies, even though, a lot of people are Muslim, but still, in fact, they never asked me what religion I was for 15 years. And then they found out when somebody mentioned it, on one of the trips. Mm-hmm. They don't care. So, I mean, they're highly educated. And I think they could do very well working together with Israelis. They're really, it's really such a tragedy what's going on over there, because if they could just work out a way to live together, they could be so much better off, both sides. So that's my dream.
What, if anything, with all the work you've done, surprised you from the Palestinian side? And what, if anything, surprised you on the Israeli side?
I mean, it's just the opposite of what you would think over there. I mean, I go to the Israeli cities and there's this palpable tension. It's like there's this fear that something bad's about to happen. So they're always on guard. They're always vigilant. They're always watching out for everything. They're in control of every little movement of every person because they're afraid. They're afraid of violence. But then, I go 2 miles away to a Palestinian city, and it's just the opposite. They're like having a big party. Everybody's laughing, and they're like, they don't feel that same pressure. And maybe it's because they feel like they've already taken Israel's best shot, and they're used to it by now. I mean, they're used to all this, all these measures that have been taken against them. So that's what kind of surprised me, is that, and made me realize that the the occupation weighs just as heavily on the occupier as the occupied. So that was kind of a surprise, to me.
Yeah. But I guess to me also the fact, shootings and stabbings and all that, I mean, look at this week having, not that I have to defend Israel, but certainly there are reasons why they're on guard, and that does cause fear, and it's really unfortunate. I wish everybody on both sides would be able to just move on.
Sure.
And
I mean, I'm sure the Palestinians would love to move on, as soon as they're either given their land or a vote.
Yeah.
There'll never be peace without justice. And I think it's pretty clear that they're either entitled to have their state, or they're entitled to vote. So it's either a nationalist struggle for independence or a struggle for civil rights. And so until that's resolved, in fact, the US intelligence and military leaders have said in the past that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is the #1 security threat to the United States in the world, because it's a recruiting tool for terrorists. Look what they're doing to our Muslim brothers. Look what Israel's doing, and the US is enabling over there. And that's what gets people to join terrorist groups. I mean, so there won't be peace in the Middle East until the Israeli-Palestinian issue is decided. And so to me, it's about international law. It's about justice. It's about giving people what everyone else in the world has and is entitled to, which is some measure of either sovereignty or participation in the political system. I mean, you can't continue this apartheid system forever. And so, it's no wonder that, people are willing to die because they feel like there's no hope for their children. There's no hope for the future. So yeah, they like to move on, but they like to do it, on their own terms and not on Israel's terms. And to me, from everything I've learned, and you heard the mayor of Bethlehem saying on camera, we need bridges of peace and love and understanding. I mean, no one in Israel's ever heard that. from a Palestinian mayor. So I think there are constituents for peace over there. I think the majority of people would like to have peace, would like to have justice, but the agenda is being dictated by the extremists on both sides. And so, yeah, you see some violence in Israel, but do you see the violence that happens every day in the West Bank by settlers, which are enabled by the Israeli army or by the Israeli army itself? Every day, Palestinian kids are being killed. You know, but we just say, oh, well, you know, that's security. They need security. Well, there's not going to be any security. The only way there's security is when there's justice and when people have their human rights. So, yeah, everybody wants peace, but they want it on their own terms. And that's why.
And unfortunately, people are also being killed on both sides.
Yes.
So.
That's the result.
And you know, it does, you know, retaliation, retribution does no good for it. It doesn't do any good for anybody.
No.
But
no, but that's the story of what's going on there. It's just revenge, and then revenge for that revenge, and the next revenge.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle that helps no one.
Right.
My last question, I think you actually answered it about what you think the biggest obstacle to peace and what steps, if any, do you know of to help overcome it? But anything else that you want to say about that?
Well, yeah, I think the biggest obstacle to peace is the lack of understanding. And extremism. Extremism is the biggest obstacle to peace everywhere.
Yes.
Because these extremists, you know, they try to sabotage a peace agreement.
Right.
Right. So then it's like, oh, well, we can't have this peace agreement because some group, you know, did something. Well, somebody's got to step up and say, look, we're not letting these extremists dictate our lives. We're going to do this thing right. And then if we have to deal with extremists, we'll deal with them. But we just let them decide what's going to happen. And so, you know, so our idea is, how do we, you know, what steps can we take to overcome this? That's your second part of your question, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the problem is lack of understanding. And the solution is to bring as many people together as possible, individuals, organizations, and institutions, to work with their counterparts on collaborative projects that create benefits for people on the ground, so that they're going to say to their leaders, we don't want any more war. We don't want any more fighting. We don't want any more injustice. We want peace because these are our friends, and we want that wall removed. This is what, you know, I was hoping that happen between Kfar Saba and Qalqilia, is that they would get together and ask the government of Israel to take down the wall, because they're neighbors and they want to be friends and neighbors, and they don't want this wall there anymore. So, you know, it's like you have to have, the leaders are going to do what they think people want them to do in the long run. And so if people don't tell their leaders what they want, then nothing's going to change. So if we bring enough ordinary people together, build trusting relationships, and then tell their leaders, we want change, we want this resolved, because we don't want to live like this. We don't want our kids and our grandkids to live like this. And then with climate change, it creates a sense of urgency. Creates a sense of urgency. You know, we can't just have the status quo forever, because the climate, the earth is going to destroy us both. And so the climate change in the Middle East is much further along than it is in the US or anywhere else. It's a reality of daily life.
Yeah.
So working around that, using that issue to bring people together, I think is genius. And I'm honored to work with EcoPeace, with Interfaith Encounter Association, with Sister Cities, and you know, because like Margaret Mead said, don't ever underestimate the potential of a small group of people, committed people, to change the world, because indeed that's the only thing that ever has changed the world.
Right.
I was paraphrasing Margaret Mead.
Yes, I'm familiar with the quote, and you got your point across. So, well, thanks so much, Steve, for sharing with us today your many terrific projects that have brought together so many citizens to work together cooperatively, even in the Middle East. So next week on April 12th at 11 a.m. Pacific time, we'll be speaking with Reverend Nicholas T. Porter, Executive Director of Jerusalem Peace Builders. Their vision is a Jerusalem in a world where Jews, Christians, Muslims, and Druze live together as sisters and brothers in dignity, equality, and peace. Amen. Where do we sign up? Jerusalem Peace Builders, or JPB, is an interfaith nonprofit organization with a mission to create a better future for humanity across religions, cultures, and nationalities. Integral to that mission is the belief that the future of Jerusalem is the future of the world. To that end, JPB promotes transformational person-to-person encounters among the peoples of Jerusalem, Israel, Palestine, and the United States. We hope you'll join us and hear how they work to bring together Israelis, Palestinians, and Americans to work together in understanding. We'll leave you now as we pray that the violence in the Middle East and in Ukraine will stop, and that everyone will someday live in peace, shalom, and salam.